everyone, it's Michelle Lupton here, and today I'm sharing how I made a birthday card using the background stamp or bold print stamp from Hero Arts called the Espalier fruit tree stamp. It's just such a beautiful background stamp, and I honestly have not used it enough, so I decided to pull it out and put it to use. So I'm just starting with some Nina Solar White cardstock, and I have stamped it with Versamark ink, and I'm just grabbing some paper so that I can sprinkle some embossing powder over it. So I'm using white embossing powder from Hero Arts, and you can see how gorgeous that background stamp is when all that embossing powder sticks to it. Now just put all that embossing powder back into its little container and melted the embossing powder on my panel with my heat tool. Does take a while when you've got a panel that's this big and it's completely covered with so much embossing powder. It does take a while. So by the time I'm finished, it's quite warm. So I quite often just put it down on my work surface and hold it down so that it can cool down and try and avoid some warping. It's not going to completely avoid the warping, but it helps a little bit, I think. All right, so I've grabbed out some Distress Oxide inks. I'm starting here with dried Marigold, which this is the first time I've used this ink pad. Believe it or not, I just didn't have dried Marigold for many, many years, and I don't know why, but I have it now, and it's going to get some use. All right, so I wanted there to be sort of an ombre between the orange and pink. So in the middle, I'm using Saltwater Taffy, and at the pink end, I'm using Kitsch Flamingo. And you can see I've got my ink pad sitting there in my ink stand so that it's not sort of moving all over my desk and I'm not having to chase it across my desk. Now, I decided that the difference between the pink, the Kitsch Flamingo and the Saltwater Taffy wasn't great enough, so I decided to actually go over the Saltwater Taffy with a little bit of dried Marigold so that the ombre was a little bit more smooth. There wasn't such a sort of stark difference between the three colours. It blended a little bit better. And I'm just using a dry rag to rub over the embossing, so I wiped off any of that Distress Oxide ink that was sitting on top of the embossing. Now I've just cut this panel down. I'm trying to cut it down so that the pattern on the panel is centered on my card, but I also wanted a 1/4 inch frame around that panel because I always like some white on my cards. You know me, I always have to have some white space, even if it's only just a little bit. And you can see I had changed my mind a couple of times about which direction I wanted this to sit, but I finally decided to have the pink at the bottom. All right, so I pulled out this birthday die, which is a layered die. It's got a shadow behind it, and this is from Simon Says Stamp. And what I'm going to do is cut the shadow die from some vellum. This is vellum from Hero Arts, and you can see I'm using my Hero Arts compact cutter, which is really handy. You can just use it on your desk and it doesn't take up much space. And then I'm just going to cut out the actual word with some Hero Arts white glitter paper. So I'm just finding a little piece of glitter paper here that will be around about the right size. No need cutting into a huge big piece. If you've got a few little offcuts there, it's always useful to keep the offcuts handy when you need them. And I'm going to run that through my compact cutter as well so that I can adhere them together. So put the glitter on top of the vellum. Okay, so once I've got them both cut, I'm going to just use my fingers and my tweezers to poke out all the little bits in the glitter paper die cut. It's always really important to pay attention to where the little dot on the eye is. The number of times that I have lost the dot on top of the eye and had to go back and just die cut just that little bit. Oh, I've lost count of how many times that's happened to me. So I always try to be super careful not to lose it, but sometimes I still do. Anyway, you can see that it's just sitting there ready to go. I'm not going to lose it. So I'm just going to, yeah, I can see I'm just popping out some bits in the die. Some of them are really, really small, so I just use the pin out of my glue bottle there to poke out the teeny tiny bit in the letter B. And I am using my fine tip glue bottle. This is art glitter glue that I'm using. And I'm using my tweezers to make sure I get those letters right in the right spot. Now, I am notorious. If you've seen any of my videos, you know I am notorious for adding too much glue, especially to very, very fine die cuts. But I've found that these tweezers that I've got, these are from Hero Arts as well, are really, really good. You can just trace around the edge of the letters of your die cut with the tweezers and just get rid of the excess glue. I really should just try not to add too much glue in the first place, but yeah, obviously I'm not a very fast learner. Yeah, I try, but it doesn't work very often. Anyway, so I'm just lining up those letters onto the shadow to make sure they're in the right spot. Pushing down with my hand, and you can see I still added too much glue. So I'm just using those tweezers to get the excess up. All right, now you can see I still have the dot for the eye. It's still sitting there and I didn't lose it. Hooray! So I'm just going to pick that up with the tweezers and pop it in place. Now, when I put this onto my card front, it's still got a little bit lost. So I decided I needed a little bit of height behind the vellum. And I've seen a few people do this trick. I think I first saw it from Jennifer Maguire, which is have your die cut sentiment on the top, then your vellum layer, but then have a couple of layers of the die cut sentiment behind the vellum, and that will just pop it up and give you a little bit of a shadow, which gives you a bit more contrast between your background and the sentiment and makes it a little bit more legible. I'm always on about legibility of sentiments. I hate it when I give a card to somebody and they have to squint at it and try and figure out what it actually says. I much prefer that the sentiment is very clearly legible. So this helps with the legibility thing. It also gives a little bit of dimension to the card, makes it just a little bit more interesting, I think. But yeah, it's really important to make sure you put the letters on the right side. I have actually done this before where I've just stuck the letters straight on top of the die that I already had there, so make sure you put it on the right side of the vellum. All right, so to go with the birthday sentiment, I just wanted a tiny little happy word. So I pulled out my little Ziploc bag, and in that Ziploc bag I have a whole lot of pre-stamped and embossed and cut sentiments. They are from the Everyday Sentiment strips from Hero Arts, and they are cut with the Sentiment Strips Fancy die from Hero Arts. And I just have a whole bunch of them sitting in a plastic bag, and they're always ready to go. So I've just stuck that on. I just wanted to make sure it was perfectly straight and popped up a little bit to give it a little bit of dimension. Okay, and once I've got that on and made sure that it's actually straight, I'm going to add some glue on either side so that it's actually stuck on there well, and that's my card. Now, one thing I didn't mention is all those pieces of the background panel that I cut off, I actually used for a second card. I didn't video me making the second card, but you'll see it at the end of this video. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye.